Welcome back to the deep dive. We're always diving into something new and interesting, and this time we're going to take a deep dive into the world of memory.
Ooh.
Yeah, memory. And specifically, the potential and techniques to really enhance it.
Right.
So get this. We're talking about training your brain to remember almost anything. Anything. Pretty cool, huh?
Yeah, that's a pretty big claim.
Yeah, it is. And our guide for this deep dive is Moonwalking with Einstein by Joshua Foer.
Oh, I've heard of this.
Have you?
Yeah. It's supposed to be a really good read, very engaging.
It is. It's so much more exciting than your average brain training manual.
I can imagine, yeah.
And what's really captivating is that it's not just theory. A lot of these books are just do this or think about that. Foer actually dives headfirst into this whole world of memory championships.
Wow.
Yeah. He was a journalist, so he was covering the event, and then he became a champion himself.
Oh, that's interesting.
It is. It's such a cool story. And I was hooked right away. Who wouldn't be fascinated by the idea of these mental athletes,
Yeah.
competing to memorize decks of cards or long strings of numbers.
Right.
It's crazy. And one of the things I found so interesting was that Foer, he kind of debunks this myth that these champions are just born with this superpower photographic memory.
Oh, yeah. I've always wondered about that.
Right. You'll hear about those people.
Yeah.
But it turns out it's not some magical ability.
So what is it then?
Well, that's where the real learning begins. Foer's journey reveals that the core technique behind these seemingly impossible feats, it's actually this ancient method called the memory palace.
The memory palace. I've heard that term before.
You have?
Yeah, vaguely, though. I don't really know what it is.
Well, imagine creating a mental map, but of a familiar place.
Okay.
Like your childhood home, for instance.
Okay, yeah, I can picture that.
Right. So you picture your childhood home, and then you basically start stuffing random facts into each room.
Oh.
Not exactly. The key is to associate the information you want to remember with vivid images.
Oh, okay.
And really vivid, even outlandish images.
Outlandish.
Yeah, so let's say you want to remember a grocery list, right?
Mm-hmm.
Instead of just trying to remember the word milk, you might imagine a giant carton of milk spilling all over your kitchen floor.
Okay, I see.
So the more absurd the image, the more memorable it becomes.
So it's like creating a mental movie in your head.
Exactly. And Foer doesn't stop at grocery lists. He goes on to memorize decks of playing cards, poems, historical dates, you name it.
Wow, that's impressive.
It is. And along the way, he meets some pretty colorful characters like Ed Cook and Lucas Amzik, who are both memory champions.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So they kind of become his mentors then?
Yeah, they're his guides in this world of memory competition.
That's cool.
Yeah, and Ed Cook, he's the guy who claims that anyone can become a memory champion.
Oh, come on.
Right. Sounds like a sales pitch, doesn't it?
It kind of does, yeah. Anyone can become a champion.
Yeah, that's what Foer thought too. But Cook is adamant. He's memory is a skill. Anyone can develop it with the right techniques and practice.
Okay, but that still sounds like, a big promise.
I know, right? But here's the thing. Cook tells Foer, I reckon you could win the championship next year with an hour's practice a day.
An hour a day.
That's all he says.
That's a bold statement.
It is. But Foer, being Foer, he's game on. He takes on the challenge. So he dives into this rigorous training.
So he's really pushing his mental limits.
Oh, yeah, he is. And in the process, he's really exploring the true potential of his own memory.
I like that. It's like a journey of self-discovery.
It is. It really is. And that's what makes this book so fascinating. It's not just about memory techniques. It's about the nature of expertise, the science of learning, the incredible adaptability of the human brain.
It sounds like there's a lot to unpack there.
There is. And we're just getting started.
Yeah.
All right. So we've established these memory champions. They aren't relying on some mythical photographic memory.
Right.
But, growing up, I was always fascinated by those stories of people who could glance at a page and just remember it perfectly.
Oh, yeah.
Did Foer find any truth to those stories?
Well, he digs into this famous case of Elizabeth.
Elizabeth.
Yeah, considered by some to be the only scientifically documented case of photographic memory.
Really?
Yeah, so this Harvard vision scientist, Charles Stromeyer III,
Okay.
he studied Elizabeth, who claims she could fuse two separate images in her mind. each containing thousands of random dots, and then see a brand new image where they overlap.
Hold on. She could like merge images in her mind.
That's what it sounds
Like some kind of mental Photoshop.
Yeah, pretty wild.
That's crazy.
But here's the thing.
Right.
After the study, Strohmeyer and Elizabeth got married, and she never participated in any further research.
Oh, really?
So the evidence for her photographic memory, while intriguing, remains limited.
So no concrete proof then?
Not really.
I guess those superpowers are still just the stuff of comic books.
Seems like it.
But Ford did encounter another fascinating case. That Russian journalist, S.
Oh, yeah.
Who could supposedly remember everything.
Right.
What's the story there?
S is where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
This guy was studied by the neuropsychologist A.R. Luria for over 30 years.
30 years.
Yeah, and while his memory was astonishing, it wasn't exactly the blessing you might imagine.
How so?
Well, imagine remembering every single detail of every single day. Conversations, sights, sounds, smells, everything perfectly preserved in your mind.
Oh, wow.
So every conversation you've ever had, every embarrassing moment.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
You can't forget anything, even if you want to.
Oh, that would be awful.
Right.
Yeah.
And Ford describes how this made it incredibly difficult for S to function in everyday life.
Right.
Yeah. Like he struggled to understand abstract concepts or metaphors.
Oh, wow.
Because he was so bogged down by the sheer volume of details.
So he couldn't see the forest for the trees, basically.
Exactly.
So this idea of a perfect memory isn't all it's cracked up to be.
Not necessarily, no.
It really makes you think, like, what's the real value of memory?
That's a great question.
Is it just about cramming in as much information as possible?
Right.
Or is it about something more?
I think it's definitely about something more.
Yeah.
A truly effective memory.
Okay.
It's not just a vast storage space. It's a dynamic system for filtering, processing, and connecting information in meaningful ways.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And that's where techniques like the Memory Palace come in.
Okay.
They provide a framework for organizing and retrieving information effectively.
So it's not just about remembering, it's about remembering what matters.
Exactly.
And speaking of effective memory techniques, Four also dives into the world of pinprick Talmudists.
Pinprick Talmudists?
Yeah. These are ultra-Orthodox Jews who have memorized the entire Talmud.
The entire Talmud.
Thousands of pages of text.
Wow.
It's incredible. And it really highlights the power of spatial memory.
Spatial memory, okay.
Yeah, because these Talmudists, they aren't just memorizing words on a page.
Right.
They're creating a mental map of the entire text.
Okay.
They can actually visualize the layout of the Talmud in their minds.
Wow.
Which makes recalling specific sections much easier.
So they're essentially creating a memory palace out of the book itself.
Pretty much. It's brilliant.
It is.
But is this ability to like navigate and recall information spatially?
Yeah.
Is that something we're all born with?
That's a good question.
Or can it be developed?
Well, Forey explores this through some research on London cab drivers.
London cab drivers.
Yeah. MRI scans revealed that experienced cabbies had enlarged hippocampi,
the
brain region associated with spatial memory. So navigating the complex streets of London, with its thousands of winding roads and landmarks, actually changed the physical structure of their brains.
So our brains are constantly adapting.
Yeah.
And rewiring themselves based on our experiences.
That's right.
That's kind of both exciting and a little bit scary, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
But if memory is a skill that can be developed, how do we become experts at it?
Right.
Is it all about raw talent? Or is there something more to it?
Right.
Okay, so we've got these memory champions using ancient techniques and London cabbies rewiring their brains just by driving around. It's starting to feel like memory is less about like inherent ability and more about training.
Yeah.
What did Foer uncover about how we become experts at anything, memory or otherwise?
Well, he dives into the work of K. Anders Ericsson, a psychologist who dedicated his career to understanding expertise.
Expertise.
Yeah. And Ericsson, first, there's what he calls the cognitive phase.
Cognitive phase.
This is where you're consciously learning the rules and techniques.
Okay.
Like a beginner memorizing the steps for creating a memory palace.
So kind of like when I was trying to wrap my head around this whole memory palace concept earlier.
Exactly. Then comes the associative phase.
Associative.
This is where you start to connect the dots.
Okay.
Refining your technique through practice.
Okay.
This is where Foer starts to see real progress with his memory training.
Okay.
Moving beyond simple lists to more complex feats.
So at what point do people kind of get stuck?
Oh, that's a good question.
Because you mentioned earlier that many people hit what Erickson calls the okay plateau at some point.
Right. Yeah.
And that really resonates with me. It's like learning a new language or instrument.
Yeah.
You reach a certain level, and then it feels impossible to break through to fluency.
Yeah, I think we've all experienced that.
Totally.
It's the okay plateau in action.
Okay.
We kind of slip into autopilot, relying on what we've already mastered without really pushing ourselves further.
So how do we break through that?
Well, Erickson argues that the key is deliberate practice.
Deliberate practice.
This means focusing intently on your technique, setting specific goals, and seeking immediate feedback.
So not just mindlessly repeating the same thing over and over,
Right. No.
but constantly challenging yourself and analyzing your performance.
Exactly. It has to be focused.
Okay, got it. So Ford gives some examples of this, right?
He does. He illustrates this with a rather unsettling example.
Oh.
Mammographers.
Mammographers.
Yeah. Studies have shown that their diagnostic accuracy can actually decrease over time,
Really?
even with years of experience.
Wow, that's unsettling. I mean, shouldn't they get better with more experience?
You'd think so, right?
Yeah.
But it turns out mammographers often don't receive immediate feedback on their diagnoses.
Oh.
They might only find out weeks or months later if they were correct,
I see.
which makes it difficult to learn from their mistakes.
Wow, I hadn't thought of it that way.
Yeah, it's kind of scary, actually.
Yeah, it is. So to really improve, you need constant feedback
Yes, absolutely.
to guide your practice.
Exactly. You need to know what you're doing right, what you're doing wrong.
Makes sense. Contrast that with surgeons, then. I mean, their performance tends to improve with experience.
Right, because they get immediate feedback,
Okay.
whether their procedures were successful or not.
So the key takeaway is that deliberate practice combined with consistent feedback is crucial for reaching expert levels in any field.
That's right.
So this is starting to make sense. But I have to admit, this whole idea of becoming a memory champion still seems a bit out there.
Yeah.
Like, those people must have some kind of special wiring in their brains, right?
Right.
Didn't Four also explore the world of savants?
He did.
Those individuals with extraordinary ability.
Yes. He met Daniel Tammet, known as Brain Man,
Brain Man. Okay.
who can perform these mind-boggling mathematical calculations and learn languages at an incredible pace.
Yeah, amazing.
He also spent time with Kim Peek,
Kim Peek.
an
Yeah.
inspiration for the movie Rain Man,
Rain Man, right?
who possessed an encyclopedic memory.
I remember that movie.
Yeah.
So it's easy to assume these abilities are just innate,
Right.
something they were born with.
Yeah, it's almost like they have superpowers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But did Four find any evidence to support that?
That's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
Four, being the meticulous journalist he is, starts to notice inconsistencies in Tammet's accounts.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and it raises the question, is Tammet's incredible ability solely due to innate talent?
Okay.
Or could there be more to the story?
Intriguing. So even with savants, the line between natural ability and honed skill might not be so clear-cut.
Exactly.
So maybe it's a bit of both.
Possibly.
Nature and nurture.
Right.
And didn't Four also look into cases of acquired savant syndrome,
Yes, he did.
where individuals develop remarkable abilities after brain trauma?
Right, which suggests that maybe these seemingly superhuman talents could be dormant in all of us.
Just waiting to be unlocked.
That's a fascinating thought.
It is.
So maybe those memory champions aren't so different from us after all.
Perhaps not.
That's kind of empowering, actually.
It is, yeah.
So what does this all mean for us?
Well, that's the beauty of moonwalking with Einstein.
Okay.
It's not just about memorizing facts.
Right.
It's about the power of memory to shape our understanding of the world, to make us better learners.
To enrich our lives.
Exactly.
It really makes you realize that memory isn't just this storage space for information.
Right.
It's fundamental to who we are
Yeah,
and how we experience the world.
absolutely.
And in a world that's increasingly reliant on external devices to store our memories, there's something really empowering about rediscovering the power of our own internal memory.
Yeah, I agree.
It makes you wonder what we could all achieve if we dedicated ourselves to strengthening this incredible human capacity.
It really does.
That's quite a thought to leave us with.
Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive into the world of memory.
It has.
A big thank you to Joshua Ford for taking us on this journey.
Yeah, great book.
And to all of you listening, we encourage you to explore this topic further.
Yeah, see what you can do.
Maybe even try out some of the techniques we talked about.
Exactly.
And until next time, keep those minds sharp.